We did.
recording an episode for Aurora Airwaves. I'm here with Pilley Bianchi, who's in New York City, and is one of the most accomplished people that I know. She's a pianist, a musician, a singer, a producer, and she's a champion of canine cognition and animal welfare. So, man, Pilley, why don't you kind of like take it away? It's like what you've been up to lately, especially with your
Well,
new book, For the Love of a Dog.
yes. Yes. Thanks,
Maybe
Jordy.
we'll talk about that and like kind of like bring it into well-being. And I want to hear all about what you've been up to and how you've been taking care of yourself in the process.
Oh, well, I don't know that those two go hand in hand, but
Sometimes they
we'll
do.
start. Yeah, so I am your aunt. I've known you all your life, and you've always had a great eye. I remember the first concert that we did in Buffalo, and I was sort of producing. You were actually helping me figure out where the flowers should go on stage and how all the instruments should be like positioned. And you were correct. You had a great eye for that. So,
I was probably four or
yeah,
something, four or
you were a
five,
little
or
guy.
I was
Yeah,
little.
you were a little guy. I don't know that Gabby was. Yeah, Gabby was a
She might have
baby, I
been.
think. She was a little one. So, yes, as a matter of fact, I used to carry her around. But as you said, I'm a musician, a pianist, a performer, a producer, and most recently a writer. I ghost wrote my father's first book about his journey with his dog Chaser, who is known as the smartest dog in the world. So that's been a completely extraordinary experience and a really amazing ride. So I started working with him in 2011. So that's what I've been doing for the past um, 11 years.
Yeah.
Before that, yeah, let's focus on what I've been doing lately. So really, promoting my book, which is a whole nother beast. Um,
Well, it's been so cool from like the moment that Chaser was brought into the, or at least when I started to notice
mm,
Chaser, which was when I was in high school. I mean, that's when I met her for the first time, and it's been so interesting seeing this all happen from the sidelines. Really, like I love cheerleading from the sidelines and like hearing all these stories, and like we joke that the Bianchi kitchen tables, like you can sit down for hours and hours and hours and just like hear every story in the world, and it's the most amazing place to be. And being able to hear the progression of the whole Chaser journey, when your dad, John Pilley, was doing his thing and leading the charge, and then when the torch was passed to you and you figured out how you were gonna keep the mission going because it's just so important, and you can articulate you know, the science behind animal welfare and behind cognition, but how that connects to really their spirit and what that means to us and how it
mm,
betters both of our lives.
mm.
I think that's
Yeah.
something
So,
that you've always been able to do quite well.
well, I learned from the best. So for listeners that you don't know who Chaser is, she has the largest language learning of any animal in the world, and it was her learning the names of over 1,000 objects, as well as adverbs, proper nouns, common nouns, verbs, prepositions, and how she could incorporate them into sentences that garnered her the title of having the largest language learning of any animal in the world. But I just knew her as the family dog, and which was what was really remarkable. So, um, yeah, I learned from the methods my dad used with Chaser were one and the same that he used with me. So he was really a magical man, and he was called by a lot of his students Merlin. He taught at Wofford College in Spartanburg, South Carolina for about 30 years. And his love was animal cognition. And he would bring dogs into the classroom because back in the 70s because he thought it was going to be infinitely more fun for the students to work with dogs than rats and pigeons. And so he just had this remarkable respect for nature and joie de vivre. He believed that every 5 years he needed to learn something significantly new, and that was all part of his philosophy of lifelong learning, which is sort of his philosophy that I got from him that I didn't even know I had. Um, he's a remarkable human being. So um, there's so many little isms of my dad too. So when we're talking about some of these, like your healing and we're talking about vulnerability, I'm not even sure what those mean so much and how I incorporated those into my life. But what I learned from him one day, I was asking him how he got through some difficult times in his life, right? So if we're talking about healing, and especially something tragic that had kind of happened. And I said, how are you dealing with that? He goes, well, I let it go. And I said, well, how did you let it go? He goes, well, I did. He said, why would I want to hold on to that pain? It doesn't make any sense. And it's
Hmm.
so simple, but I realized, yeah, he lived in the moment and he got into his head before he passed, but he was really wondrous at living his life and sharing that with other people. I mean, being in the
Yeah.
moment.
I mean, you can see that in the way that he talked about Chaser in all of the interviews. He had this way of understanding how rich the science can be and how to set up, all these experiments and ways of understanding how to get results that can be communicated to humans and to other scientists. But he
Well,
knew
yeah.
what was the
Uh-huh.
important thing, and the important thing was for Chaser, what did she love? What were her innate instincts? What was she ready to? What did
Yes.
she want to do, and how did she have fun? And he didn't just do that in a laboratory setting. He was holistic about it. And I think that's what, like, when I think of your dad, I think of him as like
Mm,
just in his body and bringing all of his people around
mm.
him and bringing the dogs around and doing all this stuff. He didn't isolate these areas of his life. And that's so, like,
Wow.
such a wonderful thing to think about. I mean, the fact that, like, you and Robin were learning everything about animal psychology as kids, psychology just in general,
Yeah.
like in the house and having
Yeah.
fun with it. And you were brought to the college and you got to hang out there.
Yes. Yeah, you're right, Jordy. I never even thought about his holistic approach to life. I just knew him as a naturalist, and he was a whitewater paddler. He had a deep respect and reverence for nature, and um, which a lot of people didn't even know about him. But he would go. Some of the rivers that he paddled in the southeast were the Chattooga, which is the Deliverance River that your generation may not even know that movie.
From the film, yeah.
But yeah, in the film, yeah, it's gorgeous wild river and it's extremely technical and and quite dangerous in spots. And he would paddle that river by himself in the winter just because he was so connected with his kayak to the river and then to the environment. And he had this sense of like being one with nature that always kind of blew my mind. Um, and he instilled that respect in my sister and me so that we've always had a deep reverence for nature. And whenever you're out in the woods, first of all, you got to have an understanding that you are never going to beat nature. And whether you got to go with it. If you don't go with nature, it's not going to end well. And so that was all part of his philosophy of going with the flow uh, and being in the moment, because nature, that's where nature is.
I mean, that's exactly what he was doing with Chaser. I remember when she would get like there were moments in the book, in the first book, like when she would get tired or she would get frustrated, that's when he would stop. And he knew that she wasn't this robot that could just be forced to like understand a certain amount of words every single day and be pushed. He really had to figure out
Yeah,
what was in her
that's really true.
nature.
I mean, he, you know, it's remarkable because he was adamant about not frustrating his dog, to give her the opportunity to emit her innate instincts. And if the expression of innate behaviors and instincts is so rewarding to dogs and to us. I mean, if we're able to be in an environment where we're doing something that we like, that brings us joy, we're going to be more
Hmm.
successful at it. And that was one of the things that he really encouraged with us growing up, is you got to love what you're doing, um, and use that, um, try to use that philosophy for everything that you do in life. But that being said, you know, we also learned that, um, no guts, no glory. I remember we were sitting alongside the river one day, and we were watching. On the Nantahala River, and there's this rapid where a lot of people come through, and it's called Nantahala Falls. And so the kayakers will play in this rapid and do pop-ups and all kind of tricks. And so we're sitting there watching them, and there's a new kind of 3D boat called a squirt boat that it was kind of crazy, the things that these Olympic athletes could do, because it was the Olympic Training Center for kayakers, for whitewater paddlers. So he was just kind of in awe watching these. He called them kids, you know, and what they were doing in their boats. And I said, "What are you talking about? You can paddle circles around these people. He paddled the Grand Canyon. He's so adept at who he was and what he was as far as a paddler was concerned." And he said to me, no, he goes, they're they're going farther than I've gone. He said, I know. I said, how do you know this? He goes, I know this because I don't make mistakes anymore. He said, when I don't flip,
Mm.
I know that I'm no longer learning. So it was that moment, you know, that he's like, if you're not making a mistake, you're not in the game. You're not trying hard enough. You're not pushing yourself. You're not challenging yourself. And so that was, you got to get outside your comfort zone. So that was also one of his big philosophies.
What was he like with his students in conveying that message? Was he an advocate that like everybody had to like excel and do everything by the books, or did he encourage them to be divergent and do what they wanted to do?
Oh, you know what? This is a great question, because um, my dad frequently highlighted, he goes, he goes, I got a lot of A students. He goes, but they're not having A's in life. I'd rather they be a C student and get out and experience a little bit more than stay in the classroom so much.
Oh wow.
So he also, when they weren't working hard enough, you know, he would kind of kick their butt, but he encouraged them to come into the lab, and they would have cleaning parties for the rats and pigeons. And then once the dogs came in, um, they were always doing something fun and interesting. And he was known as the paddling professor at Wofford. But um,
So he would
he,
take the
he,
students
he,
out though for that club, right? Like they would get to actually
yeah,
see in these
yes.
element.
So they started the Whitewater Club. He started that at Wofford, and his first assistant is a man by the name of well, at the time he was just a good looking boy called Eddie Coffey. And so he ended up being a Rhodes Scholar and huge in the neuroscience. So Eddie, where was I going with Eddie? Why did I bring up Eddie Coffey? But Eddie was, um, those are the kind of students he inspired. A lot of his students went into behavioral psychology because of him.
because of him.
Hmm.
I remember at his celebration of life, there were just so many people there, and everyone, they all gave different speeches, but they all said similar
Mm,
things of how much he was the reason that they went on with their career, or why they believed in themselves.
right. And he was great at kind of extracting and helping people to figure out who they were when they didn't even know, because he would ask questions and get to know them, and he would really reinforce, um, if somebody said they really wanted to do something and they hadn't done it, he's like, you got to do it.
Yeah.
So
So what
he
was it
had
like
he's
when you said you wanted to be a musician? You can tell us about like your successes that you had in high school and where you played, but
mm,
when you made the decision to go to Eastman and you
oh
were,
yeah,
you
he
know, in
wasn't
South Carolina,
he
that's a
was
big decision. That's a big trip. How did that go?
well, it was, but I couldn't wait to get out of South Carolina. I just knew that I was destined for bigger things. I
Mhm.
didn't know what they were going to be, but I wanted a, a much bigger taste of the world. And my father really encouraged that, but he was really apprehensive about me going to a music school. Um, I had just that year, my senior year, I had performed with two different orchestras as a soloist. I played the Schumann Piano Concerto with one, and the McDowell D minor concerto with another. And so I had done really well. And I went to a school that was not that challenging, so I really flew under the radar. So I could pursue piano and horses, the things that I really loved. It was not that challenging for me. So my dad really wanted me to go to a liberal art school and have a more rounded background.
Mhm.
And he even tried to bribe me and say, I'll buy you a new grand piano if you stay here. And my mother
That's
was like, John, she's not going to stay here. She is going to Eastman. And
long.
um, he later said, yeah, I was wrong. You are finding your bliss. And that's where you went, and that's where you should be.
That's hilarious, though. I'll buy you a piano. Just
Tried to
stay.
bribe me. My dad every day was like was an adventure. He was a delightful human being. Um,
Well, it's funny to me that he would say that, whereas he didn't go into psychology right away in his career.
no, that's right. He went to, he grew up in grew up in Memphis, and in the summers he would go stay with his aunt in rural Mississippi and learned Mississippi. And so part of going there was going to Bible school. So he's in high
Hmm.
school, he's going to Bible school. And so he's was sort of a teacher's pet with the minister there, because he read the Bible and he had all these questions about the stories. And so he was a little bit of a provocateur. And so he's sitting the last day of church and daydreaming, and the preacher calls out and says, isn't that right, JW? And my father is like, and he goes, oh yes sir, yes sir. And then everybody starts cheering. He's like,
Oh,
why is everybody clapping? He didn't realize, he had zoned out. The minister had said, and you are going to follow the path of theology and become a minister too as well, JW, isn't that right? And he said, oh yes sir. So he is like bound
oh
to this
no.
this this sort of deal that he'd made with the minister. And but yeah, he went with it, and that was sort of where he ended up going. But he went to Abilene Christian College. He went to Pepperdine to study theology, and then he ended up at Princeton getting his degree. And after a couple of years of a minister, he didn't really understand the hypocrisy of the church. Go
Right.
figure. So he decided he needed to take some classes in psychology, and he went back to Memphis State and got a degree, found his love of animal behavior there.
Hmm.
And that was his happy place, and got his PhD. And then we ended up in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
He was probably around my age, now that I think of it.
He changed directions in his, I believe he was 36.
36. Okay, a little older.
He was a little, yeah, he was a little older, but he wasn't afraid to change his mind.
I mean,
He
that's
was
maybe that's
really,
like a Pilley thing that I always really admire. Like you guys pick your paths, and it's like it's bold and it's brazen and it's what you want to do, and you what the world might say what it's going to say, but you go and you do it anyway because it's the right calling. I think that's just something. I mean, you have it. Aiden has that. My cousin, Pilley's son. It's just so fascinating, and I think of the thing that you said that you often say, which is like when you were a kid you wanted to do like three things. You wanted to be a musician, you wanted to work with animals, or you wanted to do interior designing. And
yeah,
you've gotten to do all those things, which is
you
at
know,
a very high level.
I can't believe you remember that. But yeah, it's crazy. And it's also, we're born with these innate, um, I don't know if it's purity, and desires and things that make us happy. And it's so arbitrary. I was not big on the outdoors. I didn't like to get my hair wet. I didn't like to get my hands dirty,
I've
but
seen the
I had a
photos of you in the
horse.
kayaks. You look like you're owning it.
Well, I know how to do it. I know how to do it because that was my family, but it was not my happy place. I like to kayak, not kayak. I like to canoe and also like to raft, but I didn't like being that close to the water. There was something in the water. I didn't like to be in the water.
Hmm.
Even though I learned to swim when I was 4, and I love to swim, but yeah, it's funny though. The things that I loved to do when I was small, and I decided I wanted to be a pianist, a veterinarian, or an interior designer. So now I've got my house. So I've really been able to get my fix on everything. We have a 125-year-old house, and I've been able to decorate it from head to toe, the 3 floors, and I chose the piano instead of being a vet because I had a horse for 11 years, and the vet had to come out and take care of the horses. And I remember my sister's horse got sick. He had colic, and the vet came out and shoved this huge, like a hose up his nose, and then pumped it, and just all this. It was so much gross shit that came out of Rusty's nose, and it went
Aw.
all over us. And I'm like, this is so not what I want to do. If this is what being a vet is, I'll just have a horse.
Yeah, there's a difference.
Yeah,
But I mean, but
but
that's so
I
cool that you
love.
got to like experience that and you got to ride and you got to be out in nature growing up. I mean,
Oh yeah, and you know what's crazy too is that the getting to bond with an animal is such a valuable experience because my horse wasn't just, I didn't just ride him. He was like my best friend.
mm,
I got him when I was in the 6th grade and had him, through college. And he was a terrible riding horse. His name was Cochise. And he was scared of everything. He was scared of his shadow. And the only way I got to have a good ride out of him is if I was following my sister Robin on her
Mm.
horse Rusty, because Cochise didn't want to lead. He was afraid of his shadow. He was afraid of mud. He, yeah, he was, but he was the sweetest thing, um, and super smart, just a real fraidy cat. So it was really remarkable bonding with a large animal like that.
You know, it's interesting because I'm always trying. For a while, I was trying to see like what is the connecting thread between music and designing your plays and animals, and I'm like, they all seem pretty different, but it's all about connection. When I think
Mm,
of you with music, I
hmm.
mean, your goal isn't to go and impress a bunch of people or to like put out the most albums you can. It's about how can you connect with the music that you're creating and how can you create with the people that you're making music with. And that requires, you know, obviously like preparation and being articulate with what you're doing. But when that happens, you're allowed to have amazing connections with the people around you and this the feeling that you get from music. And I think that the same thing is with animals, and the same thing is from creating an environment that feels really good to you. So there's something really
That's
interesting about
interesting.
the way that you were have always been pursuing connection, in the way that your dad was pursuing connection as well. And when he found that like through the church and whatnot that it just wasn't doing it anymore, he didn't just shut down his life and, you know, go live his life away and not try to pursue anything. He found the next avenue to do that in a way that made sense to him.
Yeah, that's true. And it's always, the road you end up on is not necessarily the one you started out on, but it's like it's okay to change directions. And but that was one of the things that my father was so great at, was connecting with other people. And I've always been very empathetic, and have a hard time not connecting with people, or really having an aversion towards some people. You know, they were just assholes. I don't like assholes. I don't like, egocentric, and I hate it when people take advantage of other people. Um, I've always had
The gatekeepers.
yeah, and wanted to protect the underdog. So um, and yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's just who I am. But I was listening to you, and you were talking about the first the film that you did together, and how you were you just wanted it to be the best and the baddest, and
Yeah.
um we have the when we're young, I had those same sort of ideals. I um as a pianist, I loved playing, but I wanted to wow people when I played. So there's that
Mm.
part of your ego, I think, when you're young. And the older I've gotten, it really is. I'm just happy if I can connect with someone musically or through writing, um, uh, through any kind of connection, because you never know, you never know the person that's standing next to you, their experience. And if you can make their day a little brighter, I don't know. It's an honor to be able to do that.
When did that shift start to begin? From the ego being
You know,
loud and vibrant.
I think I was well into my 30s, to be honest with you, and it was interesting because I was a songwriter, and I had a producer I was working with at the time who um, it was after I had done this MTV show for a year. I was in a house band of a show called Turn It Up, and I was the only woman in the band, and that is a whole nother story. That was not fun to do, but I was so happy to do it. and have that under my belt. And it opened a lot of other doors for me because people saw me on TV 3 times a day for a year. So I met this producer, and I had been a songwriter, but I hadn't had any cuts with my songs yet. And I was singing the songs. I was just singing them, but he said, you're a great writer, but I don't hear you in your songs.
Ugh.
And I was like, what?
What?
And I realized he was right. He was right. And
Oh.
I fancied myself like a Joan Jett, sort of like this badass rocker. And he said,
Which you were, and you are.
I
I
kind
mean,
of was, but I wanted to like have a French accent, I wanted to smoke cigarettes and be a bad girl. I hated cigarettes, I didn't drink, I'm like, wow. And so I realized I'm, I'm this quirky girl from the South, and, I was a geek in high school, and, I got I'm kind of funny, but a little snarky. So I had to lean into that. And as soon as I did, and also there was no piano playing in my songs, it was all like guitars. So he said, "You're a great piano player. You should focus on that. We want to hear that." And so when I started writing more for myself,
hmm
um, and really drawing on my own experiences as far as the songs were concerned, and you guys talk about that. You got to write what you know. If you are not
hmm
writing what you know, in my opinion, uh, you're kind of dead in the water. It's like you can imagine things, but if you don't have that basis of experience that you're bringing to your writing, or that honesty,
hmm
Um, and it doesn't have to be, especially with writing, it doesn't even have to be my experience, but it could be me watching a little boy get bullied, during lunch. It can be my father's asshole friend, who was a bigot. Um, I started drawing from all of these experiences, and, and, and once I did that, I I ended up getting a lot of attention from the music industry. I um, had 3 disastrous record deals, but at least I was doing what I wanted to be doing and singing the music I wanted to be singing. I made really poor choices because I was offered talk about just um, having opportunities being given to you and like not taking them, waiting for the next one, the better one to come along, and then that one doesn't come, and you've already shut a door. I got offered $35,000 to license one song in Germany, and at the time I was negotiating with Polygram for my first deal, and all of a sudden Viacom and Polygram said, no, 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 you can't license any of these songs. We want international rights. So yeah, walk away from it because we're going to make much more money than this. The deal's going to be better. So I was like, okay. So I turned down $35,000. And then a month later, Viacom bought Polygram, and my A&R guy went out the door.
No.
Done.
No.
Yeah. So it's just I've had several. I was offered another deal just to do a solo piano for this New Age label when New Age was really big back in the '80s, the late '80s. And I was like, I don't want to do that. It would have been money in my pocket and so easy for me to do. So later in my life, I've started to understand that opportunities come around and may not be exactly what you're looking for, but um, I made some mistakes, but they brought me to where I am today. Um, I
Right,
wish
that's
I'd
what I
learned
was
that
gonna say.
earlier.
it seems like a valuable thing to experience, like in the moment. Like it must have just been horrible,
Oh, it's
and it must have been
devastating.
so
It was
hard to just keep
devastating.
moving on. How did it affect
Yeah.
your like your personal life? Because like that's what we all don't want to have happen, right? We all think like, okay, when we get the projects going and all these cool things start to happen, then it's just going to elevate all everything in our life, which is, I think, the danger of identifying too fiercely with the thing that you're doing.
That's the thing. Tomorrow never comes, man. And it's you uh you got to be in the game. And if something doesn't feel right, um sometimes that's okay, because growing pains um are necessary to get us
Hmm.
to where we need to be. Um if something feels that, that's a whole nother conversation. If something doesn't feel right, or if there's an opportunity that you're a little too insecure to take, those are two different things.
Those are different,
um,
yeah.
but um, yeah, what were I don't know where I was
No, I
going
mean,
with
well, I
that.
think that's really interesting. So, like, in let's stay in the present, like, instead of just referring to like back then, like, what are
Mm,
things that like in writing this book, right? So this is the first book that you've done on your own, which
hmm.
everybody should check out. It's at Barnes and Noble, which is so cool. Um, but it's what are the insecurities that you had in writing a book with such a
Oh
legacy,
God.
right? So it's not just a legacy in terms of, you know, a well received and written first book, but there's the Chaser Initiative and there's the whole Dr. John Pilley legacy, and so there are so many things that you were inheriting after your dad passed and Chaser passed, and so you're holding on to all of this, and now it's how do you articulate what this is but with your voice. So like what were your insecurities, and then what were the things that just didn't feel right that you were trying to push right?
Wow. Wow, that's a lot. That's a big question.
Hmm.
And uh so I have a little bit of a story with that, and you've probably heard it. But um, after my father, I'd been working on the second book with my father. He had a New York Times bestseller, and I was a ghostwriter of that. That was also a whole nother like nail biting moment
Why don't you talk about that
when
for a minute to get some context?
yeah. So my dad, once he and Chaser went globally viral, he was offered all of these book deals, and agents came crawling all over the place. And that's when I kind of stepped in to say, wait a minute, wait a minute. We got to, Dad was saying, I can't write a book. And I was like, yeah, you can. I think you'd write a great book. And he didn't want to do it. And I said, Dad, come on, let's just go speak with the agent and the publishers. And anyway, we ended up signing with a very large agency, and who ended up shopping the proposal. So they hooked Dad up with a co-writer, Hilary Hinzmann, who is a brilliant writer. And but Dad didn't know how to find his voice in this book. And Hilary was having not doing well with finding my father's voice. So I stepped in and I said, okay, listen, Dad, I'm just going to write this chapter about Yasha. And because I'd experienced my dad with the dogs. So I wrote it, and wrote this chapter. And uh, our editor ended up reading it. I was waiting for somebody to come back with the like saying this sucks and this is not going to work and all of that, and they were like, this is great, we love this. And I was like, oh hell, I actually wrote something right. So um, that was a real shocker, that um, his he was signed to a major publisher, and that the editor didn't know that I was ghostwriting some of this book, and I didn't even know that I was able to. And so that I felt like a big imposter as a writer. but it turned out, my songwriting and my English teacher from high school had done kind of a good job in teaching me how to write some prose. And um,
Well, your writing is so musical too. I mean, we always talk about like the
mm,
cadence of the sentence and the flow
mm,
of the story and everything, and that book is just so well written. And I didn't even know that you had been ghostwriting. I remember. So Yasha
oh,
was the dog before Chaser, and the book
yes.
starts off with Yasha and Yasha's passing, and I just remember because my dog had died at the time that I really decided to read it,
Mm,
and I was just
mm,
blown away at the way that you were able to keep sentences simple and powerful. Not
mm,
pumping all these adjectives and descriptive terms and trying to elaborate on something. The writing was incredibly human, which
mm,
is how your dad spoke. Incredibly
right.
human and poetic, but not
Mm,
embellished.
right. Yeah, that was my dad. So I was really channeling him,
Yeah.
and his voice. So we were writing the second book together. His publisher wanted, which is HarperCollins, wanted, um, it used was Houghton Mifflin Harcourt and then HarperCollins, and now I think it's even, I don't even know what it is right now. But they wanted more of a prescriptive book about how he taught Chaser the names of so many objects. So we had been working on it for about a year, and he got sick, and then he passed before we'd had a chance to finish it. And I went back to his agent after he died, and he said, listen, and then Chaser followed not too long after that. And so both man and dog had passed on. And I didn't know what to do with this book. His agent said, well, I don't see how we're going to be able to put this book forward. And I really had devoted so much time and energy into this book, and I knew that it had so much valuable information, that needed to be put out there. I was really lost and kind of struggling. And I had gotten to know a lot of writers in my experience writing the first book, because Dad was asked to do review other people's books when they came out, and so I was always the liaison with these people, and two of these were writers, Kat Warren. Well, three writers: Kat Warren, Wendy Williams, who wrote The Horse, and Maria Goodavage, who wrote Doctor Dogs and Soldier Dogs, and they're all New York Times bestselling writers. And Wendy Williams reached out to me, and she said, she emailed me, and she said, "How are you doing?" This was after my mother died, so all three had died within about a year, and um, I'd handled all of their deaths um, with gratitude, because we had a good run, you know, and I felt like, how can I be sad when we had so much joy together? And my dad was 90, and my mom was like 86 um, when she passed, and Chaser was 15. Life doesn't go on infinitely. So Wendy reached out to me, and she said, "How are you doing?" And for the first time, I confessed, I said, "I don't think I'm doing very good." And she's like, "Well, of course not." And so she said, "I'm coming to visit you." She lived in Boston, in Cape Cod. And so she and her husband and their dog Taft, this border collie, came down
Mm.
uh, to stay with us for a couple of days. And she knew that she asked what I was doing. She knew that had this manuscript. I didn't know what to do with it. And I thought maybe I'll bring on a co-writer, and they can help me. She could help me finish. And I asked Wendy if she would do this with me. And she said, "Well, let me see what you've written." And I showed it to her, and she said, you got this. You can write this book. She goes, but you have to make it in your voice. And I'm thinking, I don't know what that voice is. And, uh, but I was sitting on it and having some cocktail hours with my other two friends, Maria and Kat. And they were working on their new manuscripts as well. So we would send each other bits of our books to sort of bounce ideas and spitball with.
Yeah.
And it was my sessions with them that really helped me figure out who I was as a writer and brought myself in. And I knew I wanted it to be kind of quirky and humorous. And my father always said, learning should be fun. And so I found my voice in that respect and got an illustrator. My friend, well, I didn't get an illustrator. I had a friend, our best friend's son in the UK is an illustrator. And I said, you want to work on this project with me? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And that's what we did. But it was hard. It was interesting to find my own voice. And it was a nail biter. When I first gave what I was writing to Kat and Maria, I was so nervous that they were going to hate it. And
Wow.
they ended up loving it and really encouraging me.
I think that's interesting that after all these years of presenting your art and your work to people that those feelings don't quite go away. It's just a part of the process.
Oh, never. Yeah, that is. You have great, you have these feelings of great confidence and then like, oh shit, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. I
Yeah.
don't deserve a seat at the table. So it goes, I mean, back and forth, and you just gotta stay in the game and also surround yourself with people that are honest with you.
I think that's a really cool thing that before you were even confident that you could pull this off, you were having conversations with people that were still in the field just to see what they were thinking. I think a lot of us, when we want to enter a new sphere or something, we keep it to ourselves for a little too long. But
Oh
you didn't
yeah.
have you didn't
Oh,
have a
for
problem
sure.
like
Yeah.
knocking on doors and just seeing what was going on and seeing what the options might be, knowing that
Well, it
something had to
was,
change.
yeah.
Because I remember seeing like all the how organized you were with all the notes and documentation and all the letters that had been sent to your dad, and just there were
Mm.
so many things, and I was like, oh my gosh, how does she keep any of this straight, let alone
I
translate it
don't.
into something new, like,
Oh my God, I feel like I'm so scattered, but I mean, but yeah, and as a writer too, we all, and even writing the book, and all my friends that write books, it's like you write this chapter and you write parts of that chapter, and you're right. I'm writing something. I was like, I don't know where this is going to go, so
Mhm.
it's like piecing things together. It did get really confusing sometimes, but that's all. I guess that's kind of part of the process. Um,
So if you were to teach like a writing class to a bunch of people that were writing their first books, but
mm,
you weren't going to be like a boring professor, you were going to like be really real with them and get the energy flowing and get all that stuff, what would you do, and how would you channel your dad, and how would you not channel your dad and do your own thing to get them to produce stuff
oh,
that's them?
gosh, Jordy, I don't know. I think it would be tell a story that
Hmm.
and and make it come to life. Find a way to. It's also good to sort of find a little message in a story because they're there every day. I mean, every time I walk out the door, I learn something new. So I would just find something that touches you or is meaningful to you. Um,
Hmm.
but it's also as a songwriter, I'm always trying to get Aiden, give him lyric ideas, because one of the techniques as a songwriter is you want to see what's not there, what's there, but no one, it's not there. So if you look at my mug, I see you're beautiful and fragile. And the poignancy of these flowers make me happy. And, just start describing what makes me happy. That it's so ivory and pure, you know, and just sort of uh, make what is it when you give human um, behaviors to
Personify.
an inanimate? Yeah, there you go. If you start looking at things in different ways, like see things that are there, but it's a different perspective.
I feel like so often
But
when writers are starting off, it's how do you rush to the thing that's going to get the most attention and run away from
mm,
yourself, because it can't possibly be you that's the most interesting thing. But just the experience
that
of you describing a cup is incredible because it's specific and it's coming from your perspective.
right, and something that you're experiencing. That's why I
Hmm.
think it's important to be honest and write what you know. I know that um, when we were writing Chaser, and even that was really important to have that moment. There's the moment when Yasha dies, you know, and it's that chapter is still very powerful to me. And I wrote most of that chapter, but the personal touches my dad put on that chapter. Um, there's a scene where, his beloved dog has died and mom and nobody's around the house. It's just him. And, he has to make the choice to put him down. And he, he describes it as like every step, every it was only like a 5-minute drive to the vet, but he wished it was longer. He needed it to be longer for him to be with Yasha. And when he brought Yasha back to the house, he he came into his bedroom. He was tired. He put Yasha on the left-hand side of the bed and he laid down beside him and turned out the light. And that was, I had not, I didn't even know that. And it's that sort of like uh, imagery and emotion that he doesn't have to say I was so sad. He didn't have to.
Hmm.
He he showed us. He told us what happened. So I think that those are the kind of things that I try to think about when I'm writing.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, my dad kind of demonstrated that was so much of his life. I keep coming back to my dad. Yeah, is like um, don't think about it, do it.
I love that. So how did you do that with this book? Because so much of it,
Oh God.
I mean,
Well, it
it's
was
so visual and it changes so
well
much.
that well yeah with Callum. I mean, there's so much power in an image and in drawings, and I was so enamored with that book, The Boy, the Horse, the Mole, and the Fox.
Hmm.
It's an illustrated kind of small kids book by Charlie McCasey, and that came out in 2020, and it was just so stunningly simple and beautiful, and I wanted to emulate that. I was like, wow, if we can get some images into this book, some illustrations, it's really going to take it to a whole nother level, because my father had always highlighted, in order to uh, get valuable information to the masses, particularly in science, for science to get into the general population, um, they had to see themselves in it. They had to envision themselves in it. And otherwise, people don't care about science. We see that in our culture today. They don't understand that science happens in whether we want to recognize it or not. And uh, I thought that there is a lot of science in this book, and I thought if I can deliver it in a really meaningful way, that it's going to have a greater impact. So that's why Callum and I kind of chose the format that we did. And I would just send him, it wasn't like I sent him a whole chapter at once. I would write a paragraph. And I was like, can you give me something just for this paragraph? And
Okay.
and then we started threading the book together. It was really me just writing these different thoughts and what
Mhm.
I thought were going to be chapters. That's the other thing is when you take your book to, I have a great agent. I'm very, very lucky to have an amazing literary agent. And so when you write you have to write a book proposal first, right? And there's a very, very specific format. And she was great in helping me
Okay.
outline that. But you actually have to um, put the chapters in a sample chapter, for your proposal. And I was like, well, shit, I haven't
Wow.
thought of that, and that required um, some,
That took a long time now that I'm
they're like
thinking of it.
puzzle pieces, it's
Yeah.
like putting together a puzzle. And some days you're like, oh my God, I'm in over my head. I
Putting together a
can't do
puzzle that doesn't
this.
exist.
Yeah, that doesn't exist, and you
And
don't
there's
even
no
know if
like
it ever will, you know. And that's the thing. It's
yeah.
like, oh my God, am I gonna
Oh,
be writing? Things end up on the editing room floor, And that's the other thing is you can't. The first rule of writing is nothing is precious. You
mm,
can't. Uh, you got to be able to. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Figure something else out, and you may end up using it someplace else. But
that's something that I remember hearing from Aiden that you told Aiden a bunch of times, but you've told it to me as well, and it's one of the most powerful lessons of anything
mm,
creative. And I see other successful writers and artists talk about that like ideas are cheap. What's something like a book that's strong? Thousands of ideas threaded together by you. But what
right,
slows us down is when we have one idea and we say, this is it, this is the moneymaker, this is the ticket. And it's like, okay, maybe your ego is just excited that you found something that speaks to you. Maybe you can
yeah,
let
and
more. And I think that that is exciting, like opening yourself up to new ideas and embodying that. But it's that process of letting
uh,
more in and letting more in. And then I think there's something
it's hard. It's
mature
hard.
about like letting those
Yeah,
ideas like be in your system, but not need to use them.
yeah. You feel that's where I figure it's gonna end up somewhere, you know, at some
Yeah.
point. But even though some of it's not, when I get cleaned up in my office and I go through some of my my files, and I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, I forgot I wrote this. I was like, this is so damn good, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'll put this aside and do it later. But um, yeah, it's a hard one as a writer to, to let it go.
Do ideas that you didn't get to use work and get weaved into the editorials that you do and other interviews and
Oh
whatnot?
yeah. Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
like
That,
better there.
and I'm working on a bunch of editorials now. Yeah. So, um, that's, but a lot of the editorials are also that I've been working on have also been sort of regurgitations of what's in the book, because,
Right.
you find new ways to tell the story or to highlight, especially with dogs and canine intelligence, and working with, it's a big deal right now in the canine community with fearful dogs and anxiety driven dogs. And this is something that humans have really kind of created with dogs because we've overbred them. There's too much on social media. People don't really understand um, uh, dogs' roles, and that they're babies. They come in with with not knowing how to do anything, and then it becomes a lot of work. So we end up having a lot of dogs in rescues because people just can't handle them. And so there's a lot of behavioral issues going on. So when I'm writing, yeah, a lot of this material is similar.
Hmm.
Because we're, especially in the dog community, we're preaching to the choir. But I'm trying to write in ways that we're not just preaching to other dog owners. I want to reach a wider audience.
What are conditions that lead dogs to be more anxious? And if
Um,
you were
well, the first,
to,
mhm.
I should say, if you're gonna like, if someone was going to get a dog, what were things that you would make sure that that animal was gonna have?
Um, well, the first thing is to make sure that you're really ready for a dog because they are not cats. You know, it's not like having a gerbil. We have a shared evolutionary path. You know, two remarkably different species. We're the only dogs and humans are the only interspecies relationship that's evolved for over 40,000 years. So
Oh,
the reality of it is that there is a connection that humans and dogs have um, that's not only emotional, it is grounded in science. And dogs had it much better in ancient cultures than they do today because they were actually we were teammates. And
mm-hmm.
now people get dogs because they think they're cute and for a lot of the wrong reasons. And they use crates. They call them crates, you know, to crate train your dog. That's a cage, you know. So these backwards ideologies that a lot of people they don't want to take the time to work with their dog, so they don't chew on the furniture, they don't pee on the carpet, so they put them in a crate. Um, and that develops an anxious dog because can you imagine you being in a cage for even for an hour? Can you
As a little
imagine as a
child, oh my
human?
gosh.
That's what we're doing is we're putting these sentient beings where they can't express themselves, they can't use uh, uh, express behaviors like running and sniffing and playing, you know.
Hmm.
So this is creating a lot of unstable dogs that have anxieties where they'll 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 bite, they'll bark excessively. You know, they won't be potty trained, but a lot of people don't know how to even house train their animals. So and then again, they put them in a crate and they pee and poop in the crate, and then that creates even greater anxiousness in the dog. So
The whole
that's
crate
sort of
thing
the
is
culture.
confusing to me. Like, if a lot of times it's like the place where the puppy will sleep because you can ensure they're not going to like walk around and bite stuff and eat things, but at the same time it's when they misbehave they go in their crate or their toys are in their crate.
Well,
You're
they
getting
don't.
all these mixed signals. How does a dog even know what to trust?
They don't, and that's exactly the problem. That's the problem. So anyway,
It's kind of their own
that's what.
space.
Well, if the door has to be open, you know, if you leave the door open to the crate, then it's not a cage. The minute you close that door, it's a cage.
Hmm.
So and they're not to be used as babysitters. Um, don't put your dog because then when they go into the cage, you know, and you leave the house, they don't know how long they're going to be there. It's just,
That's true.
it's, it's very emotionally stressful for dogs. And there's a lot of research to demonstrate that they have the same emotional capacity that we have. Um, and, um, yeah, it's kind of a problem in society.
When I was thinking of this all earlier, the whole point of having a dog, I feel, at least for like contemporary times, is that it's really like it offers the reflective mirror, and that when you because you can communicate through language if you work on that and whatnot, but really it's sensing each other's emotions, and it's really getting to understand a being who you can't necessarily talk to like another person. And so I feel like through my old dog, I was able to, once I slowed down and calmed down and let him be him,
Mm,
the connection just deepened. And I could see that,
that's
like,
it.
he didn't want to be pet all the time and grabbed, but he wasn't avoiding touch. He would always, curl up next to me and want to have form of touch, but in
Contact.
his
Yeah.
way.
Well,
So I
that's
think
and
it's
that's the
also new
thing is that
experience.
it's like giving them agency. We're not giving them agency to be themselves, and every dog is different. You can get um, uh, 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 you can get the same breed of dog, but they're two different individuals. You know, um,
Hmm.
and we most people have an expectation about who the dog is supposed to be, their role in the family, and
Hmm.
how they should behave. And those are very unrealistic expectations. You have to just imagine that as a child, you know, um, they don't know things. They don't. We've got to teach them. And if you uh, deprive your child of enrichment, if they like sports, if they're never able to run, and hang out with other kids. That's the other thing is socializing with other dogs. Some dogs don't like other
Mm.
dogs, but that's because they really weren't socialized. Um, well, I can't know. That's not true, but it all has to do with socialization. And a lot of it starts too with separating puppies prematurely from the mother and their litter mates. This is a really critical time for them to learn bite inhibition, because they're all biting each other. And then when one bites too hard, the other one squeals. And so they
Mm.
all learn how to control themselves in these situations. They also learn um, uh, how it feels to be part of a cuddle, with their litter mates. If they're taken away prematurely, um, they don't touching is not familiar to them, and that's why some dogs don't like to be touched because they were prematurely taken away from the litter and never got to experience that.
Hmm. That's sad.
Oh, it's
And
really
it's
sad.
sad when humans don't realize that that could be a part of the context. That.
Well, and that's what most people don't. You're absolutely right. But a lot of times when we look at even kids that are acting out, that's a symptom of something, and
Right. The kid's not choosing to do that because they want to.
well,
It's
this is
all the
some sort
processing,
of
some trauma.
behavior that's been conditioned one way or another. And and what you're saying too, as far as like communication with your dog, is like dogs talk to us all the time. And it's what you did great was with learning with Beethoven what he liked and what he didn't like,
Hmm.
and paying attention to that and honoring that. Um, so there's certainly communication between our two species, even though we don't say the same language, have the same language, but there are behaviors that we can recognize in our dogs. And it's like if we recognize them with each other. If you're telling me a story and I go, I think you know what I'm saying. I was like, wow, that's fucked up, or
Hmm.
I didn't know that. Dogs do the same thing. They have a whole repertoire of behaviors that gives us, and between body language, vocalizations, and uh, their behavior gives us a lot of information as to what they're saying.
So, for the Chaser Initiative, when Ingrid and you as well are working with kids and you're creating the curriculum for what children need to learn
Mm,
about how dogs are and how they might react and not to be afraid
mm.
and things like that. What are some of the big eye-opening parts of the puzzle that you guys have
That
found
that's a
in
great
terms of that?
question. And Ingrid is really in charge of the Chaser Initiative, which is educating kids K through 12 um, about Chaser and the legacy and the intelligence of dogs and empathy. That's one of the biggest things that we're hoping to touch on with children. And um, Ingrid's been doing great.
Good.
She's booked. We're got 40 classes coming up, um, and the kids love it because we bring in a therapy dog that they can actually work with and pet. And she teaches them how to approach somebody else's dog. So you always ask,
Oh,
may I, you know, may I come up to your dog and may I touch him, or what's his name, so that they start this conversation where they're not just grabbing onto the dog. And
oh,
and
I love that. I love that because you wouldn't do that with a
yes,
person.
you wouldn't. I mean, if yeah, you wouldn't. And when you think of dogs all the time, the first thing you want to do is just like snuggle them and pet them. They don't always like that.
But they're not stuffed animals.
They're they're not.
They're not
They're
warm
not.
stuffed animals that do everything you want them to do.
That thank you. That's I think I'll have to include that in my next
What are the
book.
conversations like in
There you
terms
go.
of like the spirit of the animal, the spirit of the dog? I feel like if you talk to certain crowds, they're going to be like, "Oh, it's all biological. It's just personality. It's tendencies. It's all constructed." And you talk to certain people, and they're like, "It's no different than a human." How do you like perceive all of that?
Well, they're everyone's an individual, and it is in our relationship with dogs. It's very much true that the dog sitting in front of you is the product of human behavior. So it's you get what you give, and
Mm,
if you are angry, you're going to get a fearful dog who's going to be more threatening, barking, maybe biting. If you're chill, and you and uh, your dog is if you let your dog be your dog and they're kind of like they roll with it, that's what you get too. And with my dad, he was really engaging with her and a lot of fun. So she was always connected and looking forward to engaging with people in a fun way. And
mm,
so you really, dogs are not dissimilar to humans. They have personalities, they have preferences, and it's our job to kind of pay attention to what those are and go with it. But yeah, dogs are very have emotions just as complex as our own. They can be curious, they can be happy, um, they can get bummed out. Especially if they're not able to get out of a cage, they can get very depressed, and gonna that sort of sadness is going to be demonstrative in their behavior,
mm.
just like ours.
Just like ours. Well, it's so nice to be able to see you so passionate about this topic in the way that your dad was, and in this new way. And it's awesome to see
Mm.
like the illustrations over your shoulder and the books behind you, and now it's done. And like, what's next? What are you working on now?
Well, wow, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm still promoting the book. I've got book signing, but the Chaser
Oh,
Initiative
cool.
is a big one, and
Okay.
we're just formally announcing the Chaser Innovation for Canine Welfare Research with the
Oh,
University of Melbourne.
nice,
That's
nice.
finally that's I'm working with the University of Melbourne for the press release, but we made that happen. So Mia Cobb is one of the world's leading canine researchers, University of Melbourne is like the Harvard of Australia, and it's all about relationships. I've known Mia for several years, and we'd never actually worked together. But I had called her a couple of years ago because I was having a problem um, uh, with some other researchers that were in Hungary, and I didn't know how to
Mm,
respond.
okay.
And so I called her up, and knowing she was one of the big researchers, I said, what do I do with this? And so she kind of guided me through it. And then um, I said, well, what are you working on? And she told me, and I said, well, what do you want to be working on? And she told me, and I was like, well, why don't you do that? And so it was, she wanted to focus on what we can do for dogs, not what dogs can do for us. That's most of the research that's out there today, is how dogs benefit humans. And
Mhm.
so anyway, that's finally come through, and I'm going to be promoting that and doing, more fundraising and speaking to keep getting that research funded. But it's a 2-year fellowship, and we've raised a bunch of money, and um, yeah, canine welfare. That's my happy place.
I'm glad you guys like met those fundraising goals, and you've been able
Yeah.
to like continue to pursue this relationship and get it done. That's it's
Yeah.
just so incredible
But
because for years, like hearing you like finding the ways to be strategic and being able to champion this amazing woman that's across the world, you found the way to
yeah,
do it, and now she has access to so many resources. Well,
yeah.
the
It's it's
spotlight
ex-
too.
it's exciting, you know. This was my father's dream too,
I
to
think
have
it's also
solid
like,
science speak.
oh no, go ahead.
Well, in order for laws to change, especially in this country, we've got people still use shock collars, prong collars. It's a dog is a piece of furniture. They don't have rights. It's not, there are no laws. So until we demonstrate that dogs are sentient beings, and more, especially for being in our lives, there need to be more guardrails in place so that you can't just get a dog and then dispose of them or abuse them. There need to be some guidelines, and we don't have that here. And a lot of it has to do because of people like to hunt, and they have hunting dogs, and then after hunting season's over, they just let them go. They just put them out on the side of a road, or it's so that's what this research is going to enable um, us to do, is to get some laws changed as far as protecting not only dogs but all animals welfare.
I'm thinking of the film, that film that came out, the dog named Gucci,
Dog named Gucci. Ooh.
and that is just an incredible example of why attention through media
Mm.
and film and just whatever it needs to be for the person who's creating the work, why these things need to be discussed. You could probably talk about that film better than I could, but that went a lot of laws changed because of that.
Yes, that's true. That's true. They did change that laws in North Carolina. Um, it was now illegal to tie a dog up and douse him on fire. Put
It's
him.
now illegal.
It's illegal. Now it's illegal to do that. It
It was
previously was
illegal
not.
20 years
That
ago.
and that's how far we need to go.
Mm-hmm.
It was okay to torture a dog.
Yeah.
But the thing is that, and that's the other thing with these kind of stories. It's hard to listen to. It's hard to watch. And any sort of pain, and the things going over in Israel, they're just inhumanities, and um, we don't treat each other that well. So it's a really long road to hoe for animals. But everything needs to be addressed, and we just need to start being gentler and nicer to each other, you know?
Yeah. Well, I feel like you're doing it. You're leading the charge. And it's books like this that I think keep us soft and keep us focused and thinking of the good
Thank you,
things.
Jordy.
I mean, I've always thought if
Thank
you're like
you.
if your dad is like the wise wizard in the log cabin, you know, the fairy tale that everybody wants to grow up and become, and we all get to experience that, but through your voice, which is a lovely and inspiring voice. So,
Thank you, Jordy. So is yours. Oh my God, I I love your readings, and
oh yeah,
the yeah, I love listening to you talk.
that's good.
Listening to
That's
and
good.
your poetry though, but it's like it's beautiful. I mean, uh especially it was the first episode.
Yeah,
Yeah,
first
for
episode.
Aurora's Airways. Oh my
Yeah.
God. You could do that till the cows come home. I loved
What did Uncle Jay say?
I
I could be a cult leader if I wanted to. And I was like, new vision unlocked. Wow, this is great. Imagine if I really put everything into this.
It's true. It's true. I would sign up. I
Well,
am signed up.
I think that we should like talk about this in a way because this podcast is in as I'm discovering people's passions and their blocks and their frustrations and their dreams, a lot of this is putting myself in the spotlight of saying that like I am an individual who grew up with artists, with musicians, with a lot of people who had dreams, and I pursued that for years. And then there came a point, you know, in the mid 20s when I just started to fall into myself and start to doubt myself and
Mm,
fall into that. And I think that it's looking back, it's really cool at like, you know, the yearly visits to Brooklyn and being able to hang out with you and Uncle Jay, and each time learn so much more about myself through
mm,
the conversations that unfolded. And
mm.
I mean, I'm so grateful for all of those
Well,
chats. And I think that like you guys were always open to receive that, and I always felt that like you guys had done a lot of that yourself because you had to figure out how to be artists when you were my age and what that's like and what the pressures are and finding your own voice. But I remember there was one part that was like there was one December when I visited, maybe in 2019 or 20 some I don't know
mm,
20 I think it was 2019 or 2021 I think it was.
mm.
And you were just praising me with like all the things you saw in me as a kid and all this light within me and this creativity. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, maybe I didn't fail. Maybe I did all this stuff. And then I went and told Fran, the my spiritual guru, and she was
Hmm.
like, well, that's great and all, but you didn't come to that conclusion and you haven't embodied it yet. You were just told it. So you're still seeking
Mm,
people's approval, people that are your
mm,
guides, your luminaries. And she's like, that's great, but now you need to step into this
mm.
and own it. So it was cool, like hearing that from just as you were saying about the poetry. Like
Yeah.
it's for me, it's so helpful to hear those things. Now it's the time to get quiet and like, okay, there's something. My poetry, my way of speaking, resonates with people. Let's have an inner dialogue about that to make it my own.
And but we all need reinforcement, we all need to, have
Yep.
affirmations that we're not, that what we're doing is okay. I mean, I got to tell you, I've seen some musicians or writers or people that just they are so full of confidence, and I'm like, damn, man, you should not be so confident,
No.
because because you actually kind of suck, but I mean, good for you.
Right.
So
I
I've
ain't gonna be the one to tell you
always
that.
well, it's remarkable that Yeah, I, I don't know what I'm meaning with this, but it's like I've seen it's I don't know why some people have confidence and other people don't. I mean,
Hmm.
I've always had confidence and who I am, but then I got lost many times along the path in my life, and kind of rediscovered, but we all go, this is life,
Hmm.
and um uh it's it's also it's hard to be in an artistic creative sort of world because we're dependent on other people um to continue what we're doing. If I mean,
Yeah.
I could write a book, and if nobody read it, you know what I mean, it doesn't matter, you
If a
know.
tree falls in the forest, nobody hears it.
It's like,
If
yeah, what
Billy
is
writes
it?
a book and nobody opens it.
But or if I was if I was playing the piano and I wanted to be a professional pianist and nobody ever hired me,
Hmm.
I'd have to. I got reinforced in my performance career because I actually got paid to do what I love to do, But
That helps.
um, there, I have to say, even times when I've been doing some of these high pressure gigs, I don't feel so good about them. They are not
Mm.
like this. This huge gig in Miami recently, and
I was trying to find a
I
way to
had,
leave that in. Why don't you why don't you tell us about that? Meanwhile,
oh
while
my
you're doing a book
God,
tour and you've just finished writing a book and the initiative and all these other things, you had
that
a little wedding, right?
little wedding with
A little
70
gathering,
musicians. Yeah. Yeah. In Miami on location.
and they all played
And,
like their own instruments, and it was easy getting everything down there.
oh God. Well, I brought my New York team and some LA team members, and then we hired a local orchestra down there. And then it was rearranging all the music, and J Lo was the main stage act, and so I was doing the ceremony and the cocktail hour, and it was every step of the way on this gig,
Ceremony has
Jordan.
70 people. Oh
It
my
was
gosh.
This whole thing was torture. It was that's the choice you make, and especially when you're in this sort of industry, it's like, okay, I didn't want to do it, but my partner Nadia wanted to, because I
Hmm.
don't want to do this, but she did, and so we did it so that I could pass the baton to her. But it was a poor choice
Oh,
on my part, especially with my book. And the only thing that makes it worthwhile is that we charged a lot of money. We got a lot of money, but
okay. That's good.
I don't recommend that. I don't recommend that when you're taking something that I know through experience. I knew how this was going to go down. I really
Hmm.
did. It was not going to be easy. And it ended up being more than Nadia expected too. Um,
That's good for her to see.
yeah, it was an eye opener for her, and to see how much behind the scenes work there is. But I don't advise. I experienced a gig similar to that, and that's why I didn't want to take this gig. So it's like sometimes it's like, yeah, do it, see how it goes, and then I don't do it again. Don't repeat that. That was my bad for taking the gig. I knew what it was going to be.
It
So,
sounded cool though. I mean,
oh my God,
the
it
Japanese
looked,
drums that you had to fly in, and
oh my God. That was the nail biter, and I couldn't find the taiko drummers, so we had to bring in drums from Japan. It's like, I didn't. Do you know how expensive that was? It was like, just to bring these four taiko drums from Japan, it was like $12,000. $12,000 just for the drums. So that gives you an idea of like the scale of this wedding. It was it it Yeah. But we had over budgeted because I knew that shit like that was going to happen.
Good, good. Well,
Those
I
are the
think
only things the only thing I know with a gig that big is you don't know what you don't know. And some shit's going to fly. It's going to. And you got to prepare for it and be able to pivot.
well, it's
No.
not like it's your first wedding either. Like you've done so many of them with these
Right.
high stakes and with elaborate wardrobe and instruments.
They're all nail biters. You know, the last thing I think about is performing. You know, performing is the easy
Hmm.
part. It's like all the details and uh, the travel. You know, it was fun for a while. It was a
Yeah.
challenge. I love traveling to St. Bart's and going to Rome, and
Oh yeah.
performing in New Orleans. Those were amazing. And I've got stories to write a whole nother book, but
But that
about
ties into something that I'm thinking of that like that you were so when you were saying earlier about like you were singing and you were songwriting when you were getting started and whatnot and you weren't playing the piano. Something that you always told me was like you got to get the job done. And
mm,
you can't always rely on people to show up for you. And a lot of our conversations have been that, like me building up these big teams and relying on lots of people. And at the end of the day, people might show up and it might be great, but the only thing you have control over is yourself.
you,
And I found in a
yeah,
lot of ways that, like, through my choices of directing and being behind the camera, okay, sure, it was a great way to like get things going and whatnot, but it was also a way for me to hide myself, to not have
mm,
to speak the audio dramas or to speak the poems, right? Which now I'm finally
right.
doing. Um, but I think there's something about that that like it's all on you to show up, and it might not be
hmm
the preferred way to do it, but great experiences are going to come from that.
That's right. It's true. And I remember when I first had a band. Um, I and then I had problems keeping the band together, and I I started singing and playing myself. I mean, just me. I was like, I couldn't hide behind a band anymore. And that first gig that I did, I was scared to death. I was so nervous. And I
Mm.
thought that people wouldn't listen, that they would leave. And they didn't. You know, I
Um,
was like, wow, was my fear for years, hiding
mhm.
behind another a band. And yeah, it's hard to, especially earlier, like in earlier in your career, to um, for to just be you, because then you're pretty exposed, you know.
Yeah.
But the good news is that it's you, so you can do whatever you want and you can keep things going, you know? You can be more prolific when it's just you. If you
Yeah.
don't judge your shit, that's the other thing is, it's not quite ready, it needs to be polished. It's like, no, 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 just get it out the door.
Just
Just get it out the door.
just go for it.
Mm,
What's
yeah.
the quote I'm thinking of? It's like the in the unknown, the only thing you're going to experience is just more of yourself. And so the
Mm,
judgment that you fear is just you judging yourself based on an
mm-hmm.
aspect of you that you haven't seen yet. So
Yeah,
why wouldn't we just want to
that's
see
true.
more of ourselves? How can we
Well,
follow our
because
bliss if we don't try to see
maybe
ourselves?
we don't like ourselves too much. Or it's just a
Or we're
matter,
told
it's a
not to trust ourselves.
confidence. Yeah, it's a confidence issue. And the only way to build confidence is to practice and do what you're doing. It's like that muscle, with
Hmm.
basketball or in any sort of sport. And piano playing, it has to be rote, before you can really, so you can just effortless, effortlessly do these things. It takes practice. Um, and that's where confidence comes from. just doing it over and over and over again.
Aiden had a good quote the other day, which was like, you might want to write the next great big novel, or you might want to do all these big things. Like, not me in general, but like, not me particularly, but in general, you might want to do all these big things, but maybe the thing that you need to do is write a sentence every day
Mm,
and see that you can do that and build that into your
right.
being, and then know you can step a
Yeah.
little further and take couple more steps.
Yeah. Yeah. It's baby steps. And that's also part of writing is just sitting down to do it because, I'm like everybody else. There's always something to do before I write. I got to have my coffee, and then I got to check my email. And then, then, you know, I need to vacuum the floor because it's a little dirty. And then it's time for lunch. You know,
And then a little nap and,
you
and
know,
the
yeah,
martini.
it's just eh, that's sort of the way it goes. So it's just like sitting down and doing it. Like and Jordan, I have to say, everything that I've ever done in life that I'm proud of has been because of a deadline. Deadlines are your friend. I've
Mm-hmm.
never finished anything without that I'm particularly proud of without a
We've
deadline.
talked about that one a lot. It's so true, though. It's so true.
Yeah.
Just gotta find ways to get it done.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any parting words for the creatives and artists that are listening
Oh,
to this? Maybe something
well.
the one thing that you would tell your younger self to empower yourself, or
Mm,
something that you see in yourself that was there from the beginning.
don't. Well, one year I just decided I was going to be fearless, and that was a good year. You know,
Okay.
dare to be fearless, and in everything that you do. You know, imagine the things you can do when you're fearless.
Were you not fearless before that point?
Um, no, I think I was confident in some areas, but certainly not fearless in others. But I think that was the year that I decided that I would really um, be who I was as an artist, which was, it was recognizing who I actually was and not who I thought I was or wanted to be.
That's a good quote. Well, on that note, thank you so much. Thank you so,
Courtney,
so, so
thank
much.
you.
You were a gem. I'm so glad that we got to do this.
You're amazing.
So much
Thank
to
you.
offer. Thank you for joining me under the Northern Lights once again. I look forward to sharing more Aurora energy with you all. Stay tuned. Keep an eye to the skies for our upcoming transmissions. In the meantime, please take just 20 seconds to give us a 5-star review. It'll help us grow and share our light with the world. It really will. And join us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook to stay in the loop with all that is to come. I'll see you soon.